Assalamu alaikum, this is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight is about the continuing aggression in Jerusalem by the Israeli military. Israeli soldiers shot and beat worshippers at Islam's third holiest site in Jerusalem in ongoing violence. More than 700 Palestinians have been injured as they resisted the attack on Masjid al-Aqsa. They include medics, children, and women. Palestinians have been resisting the eviction of the entire Muslim neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, which is next to Al-Aqsa. Israeli soldiers were trying to remove Palestinians to allow groups of illegal settlers to enter the holy site. The police fired rubber-tipped bullets and stun grenades as Palestinians responded with stones. The invasion led to excessive damage and a fire in the Al-Aqsa compound. In an accelerating situation, 28 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. This followed the Palestinians firing homemade rockets at Israel with 2 casualties. U.S. Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, along with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, criticized Israel over inhumane evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. Senator Sanders said that the U.S. must speak out strongly against the violence by government-allied Israeli extremists in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Senator Warren called the evictions illegal and said they must be stopped immediately. In related news, UFC mixed martial arts world champion Khabib Nurmagomedov has asked for prayers for Palestine. He said Palestinians are mistreated this way because they believe in God. Condemnations of Israel are coming in from countries around the world. However, Germany has rejected the charge of apartheid against Israel. Human Rights Watch earlier this year accused Israel of instituting a system of apartheid against Palestinians. The charge was first leveled by Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem. Palestinian social media users from Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Jerusalem have been censored, limited, or shut down. As Israel commits apartheid, are social media companies killing Palestinians virtually? Here's a report by Ali Khalaf and Saliha Farouk.
Palestinians have slammed social media companies for shutting down their personal accounts and censoring their content on Palestine. Social media has been an organizing tool for the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood protest movement in Palestine. This remaining Palestinian neighborhood in East Jerusalem is trying to protect its families from forced illegal evictions by the Israeli military.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi.
Palestinian protesters, including those opposing apartheid in Israel, are using the hashtag #SaveSheikhJarrah. It is not clear if social media companies are censoring Palestinian protests at the order of Israelis.
Later in the show tonight, we'll be discussing the latest situation in Palestine with Professor Mazin Kumsieh from Bethlehem. He'll also be discussing the history of Israeli aggression in detail, so keep watching Muslim Network News. Muhammad Ashraf Sarai has died in an Indian prison. He was 77. Sarai was the chairman of Jammu and Kashmir Freedom Movement and a very respected leader. The Kashmiri Bar Association has described his death as a custodial murder. Sarai was detained last July under the Indian law known as Jammu Kashmir Public Safety Act, or the PSA. Human rights watchdog group Amnesty International calls PSA the lawless law. Sarai was not tried in any court of law and was tortured during his detention. The appeal by his family to provide him medical treatment was rejected. The Islamic Society of North America, the continent's largest Muslim organization, issued a condolence message to his family for the irreparable loss. Researchers have found that new variants of COVID virus may be more vaccine resistant. But the good news is that Pfizer vaccine is 97% effective in most cases. Pfizer has also released a new vaccine for children aged 12 to 15. The variant that originated from South Africa may be more resistant, being only 75% effective. In the US, 95 million people were fully vaccinated by April 26th, but over 9,000 COVID 19 infections were reported to the CDC. That comes to less than 0.01%, although CDC says it is an undercount. In related news, the pandemic has claimed the lives of 43 professors of Aligarh Muslim University in India. Aligarh Muslim University is a historic university established for Muslims in India in 1875. Are there genetically modified mosquitoes in your backyard? The first genetically modified mosquitoes have been released in the Florida Keys. These were developed by Oxitec to suppress disease-carrying mosquito populations in the region. This is the first time genetically modified mosquitoes have been released in the country. Aedes aegypti mosquitoes can carry diseases such as Zika, dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever. Releasing modified mosquitoes offers a way to control the population without using pesticides. There could be a second referendum in Scotland to decide whether to end the nation's 300-year-old union with England. Two pro-independence candidates of the Scottish National Party won last Saturday. This gives the party a majority in the Scottish Parliament, which puts the question of independence back on the national agenda. In her victory speech, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said that her party had delivered a historic and extraordinary win with 64 seats. She said the party's priority was to keep people safe in this pandemic, but her party will still seek a second referendum on the independence issue. School-age girls is increasingly becoming the target of attacks in Afghanistan. The Shia neighborhood of Dasht-e-Barchi blamed the government for an attack that killed 85 people, mostly students, last Saturday. The Taliban have denied the responsibility for the attack and is asking the government to protect schools. A new report shows that 40% of the victims of US airstrikes on Afghanistan were children. Data published by the group Action on Armed Violence said that 1,600 children were killed or wounded by airstrikes between 2016 and 2020 in the country. Scientists recently discovered that nuclear reactions are still smoldering 35 years after the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded in Ukraine. Neil Hyatt, a nuclear materials chemist at the University of Sheffield, compared it to embers in a barbecue pit. Now, Ukrainian scientists are scrambling to determine whether the reactions will die out on their own or require extraordinary interventions to avert another explosion. Chernobyl is considered the worst nuclear disaster in history in terms of both cost and casualties. Egyptian civil and military courts have issued more than 1,400 death sentences for supporters of ousted and now deceased President Mohammed Morsi. 17 Egyptian prisoners, including Sheikh Abdul Halim Jibril, were executed yesterday. Sheikh Jibril was 80 years old. Regime authorities carried out the death sentence at dawn in Wadi al-Nathroun prison. The executions took place in complete secrecy and without prior notifications to the families. These 17 were convicted on fabricated charges in the case known as the Kardasa massacre. 13 policemen were killed during a 2013 attack on a police station in the Ghiza suburb of Kardasa. Eid al-Fitr is coming. Muslims are sad Ramadan is ending, but happy that Eid is almost here. More details about Eid in this report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
On Thursday, after the holy month of Ramadan comes to an end, Muslims around the world will celebrate Eid. This post-Ramadan Eid is called Eid al-Fitr. Muslims celebrate Eid al-Fitr with lots of preparation. It starts by thoroughly cleaning the house. Special decorations are arranged, and everyone gets their hair cut, including shopping. Last-minute shopping is a ritual as well. New clothes are prepared, and the ironing board is usually busy the night before Eid. Eid day begins with waking up early and wearing nice clothes. Perfume is also sometimes common to wear, and children greet their parents. Muslims then visit large open places or mosques to offer Eid prayers in the morning. After Eid prayers, families visit each other and tend to gather at their families' houses. People also give money to kids. Some also visit graveyard sites to pray for their loved one. To this extent, things seem to be similar around the world, but when it comes to food, it is a different story. In the Middle East, Iraqis prepare their favorite cookies called klisha, or date cookies, the night before Eid. On the other hand, Syrians prefer ma'moul. In Africa, kahk is a popular food in Egypt and Sudan. Lasida is in Morocco and kambabur in Somalia. Ethiopia goes with its staple dorowat. In South Asia, sheer kurma reigns in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. Eid is a wonderful mix of culture and faith and celebration.
Thank you, Ali and Saleha, for that report. Before moving on to our analysis segment, let's take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
So it's nothing extraordinary what we do. It's just a human to human, like brothers to brothers and sisters to sisters. Nothing else, nothing more.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Walking up and down the world's largest refugee camps, I met Sister Fatima. Well, I'm calling her a sister. She was just a teenage girl, my granddaughter's age. Her parents were slaughtered by the Burmese military, and she was dragged by the Burmese soldiers to their hut, and all night long she was violated. She lost consciousness. When she regained, and in the morning and soldiers were themselves away, she ran and hid in a vegetable patch. Some people saw her, gave her clothes, and took her 4-day-long walk to Bangladesh. Who will speak up for her? Who will stand up for her if not you and I? It's our responsibility. It's our duty, brothers and sisters in humanity. And that's why I like you to support Burma Task Force. I'm a volunteer for it. But Burma Task Force is standing up to stop this genocide, violation of our sisters. You and I are free, they are not. Please stand up, work with Burma Task Force, and donate today to Burma Task Force. Together, we can do it. Assalamu alaikum.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Earlier in our show tonight, we shared the story about the recent Israeli attacks on Palestine. To know more about the latest situation and the history of Israeli oppression in Palestine, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. For a week now, news from Palestine is that hundreds of Palestinians are being injured. They're in Masjid al-Aqsa, which has been invaded and re-invaded by Israeli military multiple times, and that's where Palestinians are resisting. Why Palestinians are in Masjid al-Aqsa? That's one question. But media in the United States, and now Israel has started bombing Gaza once again. Of course, Palestinians are putting rockets. Um, the question which concerns me is how US media is portraying it. It is using the term like Palestinian and Israelis protracted conflict, chronic conflict, uh, as though don't worry about it, it just continued to happen. But Masjid al-Aqsa is sacred, and Palestinians are occupied people. Nobody is using that term occupied, and no one is using the term which Human Rights Watch is using, which is apartheid. This is the term that Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem also uses, considering from river to the sea is an apartheid regime. So while everyone else is talking, Muslim Network is honored to have a professor right from the Holy Land, Professor Mazen Qomsieh. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Welcome to Muslim Network TV. Professor Mazen teaches at Bethlehem and Berzet universities. So you're very close to what all of this is happening. So tell us, what is happening right now around Masjid al-Aqsa and Gaza?
Well, to put things into perspective, this has been going on for decades. Ethnic cleansing, as you know, is part of what the Israelis are doing, and they have been engaged in this since the founding of the State of Israel. Israel as a state was founded on an idea, the idea of Zionism, which is to remove the people of the land and create a Jewish state in Palestine. This Jewish state in Palestine, by definition, meant that Muslims and Christians do not belong here according to this idea.
So Professor, why that
million,
ideology on which Israel was established,
Yeah.
what are they doing right now around Masjid al-Aqsa?
But this is part of it. There's 7.5 million of us are refugees or displaced people. And the problems here started in the last few weeks in this holy month of Ramadan, as you know, when the Israeli government decided to move on with the evictions of 28 families from Jerusalem to add to this long line of refugees and displaced people and to make Jerusalem a Jewish city, basically. And Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood and Silwan neighborhoods are the last neighborhoods that are in Jerusalem around the old city that have not yet been fully made Jewish, so to speak. There are a couple
So Sheikh Jarrah is a neighborhood which is still a Palestinian neighborhood. So they're trying to,
in
and
Jerusalem.
this is the last one left?
That and Silwan, around the old city, those are the two key areas which when Israel removes the Palestinians from them will make the colonies around Jerusalem completely encircle the old city. West Jerusalem has already been ethnically cleansed in 1948 of its Palestinian population. And East Jerusalem, which was occupied in 1967, has been slowly in the past, since 1967, the past 54 years or so, has been slowly being transformed to a Jewish city. And this is the core of the problem. And then the second
these
factor,
people,
which adds
you
to
mentioned
the
27
problem,
families, right? These 27 families which are being evicted from that
28,
neighborhood.
yes.
Is it their own home which they are being taken
Yes,
out
of course. But these are people who also were evicted before from Haifa and Jaffa and brought to this area in 1948, not allowed to return to their homes and lands. And as agreements between the United Nations and the government of Jordan. They were settled in this part of Jerusalem. So they're
Also,
not
these are
original Jerusalemite families. That is part of the excuse that Israel is using. But if you want to ethnically cleanse somebody who comes from Haifa, from Jerusalem, you have to return them to Haifa. Israel refuses that and wants to remove them completely and adds them to the refugee population.
So
So
they
the
are
one,
already a refugee, and now they're being made refugee again.
yes, and this has
So,
happened before in other situations, still happening now. For example, the Jahalin Bedouins who were removed from the Naqab went to the Jordan Valley, and then 1967, 68, removed from the Jordan Valley and sent to the uphills near Jerusalem. And now Israel wants to remove them a third time, make them refugees a third time. The point is, Israel wants Jerusalem to be a Jewish city, and they want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they want to build a temple there, so to speak. This is the plan. They want to make Jerusalem a Jewish city, and the presence of Al-Aqsa Mosque and the presence of Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan and the old city of Jerusalem is an inconvenience to the Zionist plan. So the idea is to remove those. And Israel thinks, with the US support, of course, that they can get away with this, and that this is what emboldens them and gives them impunity from international law, because the US government uses its veto power to protect Israel and also is complicit with Israel in other ways, like, for example, funding the Israeli military to the tune of $4 billion every year of our
is
tax
some
money.
of that $4 billion which US is giving, do you think some of that is being used to evict Palestinians?
Yes, of course, because money is fungible and it's to fund the Israeli military, and that's who is carrying out these evictions and have carried out these evictions since 1947, to be clear, for these past 74 years. Plus, Israel has been ethnically cleansing Palestinians with American support, with US government support, which is tax money. Israel gets more in foreign aid than Sub Saharan Africa and Latin America combined from US foreign aid. So that's what emboldens Israel.
So, Professor, share with us what was the number of Palestinians, say, in East Jerusalem around Masjid al-Aqsa in 1967 when Israeli occupied it, and what is the number now of Palestinians living there?
Well, I mean, the numbers don't tell you very much because you're comparing different eras, and of course, Palestinians reproduce. If you look at the projections of 1967 to what it would have been if they were allowed to continue living in Jerusalem and not removed from Jerusalem, the number would be much higher. Israel aims to reduce the proportion of Palestinians in Jerusalem. Palestinians in Jerusalem used to be 55, 60% Muslim, 15% Christian, and the rest were Jewish. Now the numbers, the percentage is completely different. There's only 33% Palestinian Christians and Muslims left in Jerusalem as a population. And Israel wants to reduce that in the next few years, actually, to 25% or less. And they are actually bragging about that, for example, on the website of the municipality, so-called Municipality of Jerusalem. They said, we want to increase Jewish population to be 75% or more instead of the 66, 67% that it is now. So this is their plan, and their plan is very well laid out. It's a plan of ethnic cleansing, and they are doing it on a daily basis. Just in the past 20 years or so, more than 6,000 Palestinian residents of Jerusalem were pushed out of Jerusalem, were denied ID, blue ID card, which allows them to stay in Jerusalem. They changed their blue ID card to the green ID card, which is the one of the West Bank, which I hold, the green ID card. So this is the idea. I used to be a high school teacher in Jerusalem, and I'm not allowed to enter Jerusalem. Why am I not allowed to enter my city or even go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Easter? My family is Christian. I'm not allowed to do that. And the Muslim brothers of mine, friends of mine in Bethlehem are not allowed to go to Al-Aqsa Mosque. Why? Because we're not Jewish. If we were Jewish from America or Poland, we would be allowed not only to come here and go to Jerusalem, we would be given automatic citizenship and given rights to steal Palestinian houses in Sheikh Jarrah or Silwan and settle in them simply for being Jewish. This is the racist system that exists here, and it affects people.
So, Professor, could you explain what is this blue card as compared to green card, which you now have?
Yes, Israel, since its founding, it has segregated the native Palestinians. Some of them they made refugees in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. Some of them refugees in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And then the people who remained, the Palestinians who remained, whether remained in 1948 or after the occupation in 1967, Israel occupied Bethlehem and Ramallah and East Jerusalem and those other places. They gave us different ID cards, similar to what happened in South Africa under apartheid, where there was a pass system and different Bantustans were given different ID cards for the black people. These were treated as subhuman beings with different levels. So the different levels of discrimination, basically, all of us are at a much, much lower level of discrimination than, for example, the Ethiopian Jews or the Mizrahi Jews, who are also discriminated against, but they are at a higher level than us. Israel has about 10 levels of discriminations, starting with the top, with people like Netanyahu, who's Ashkenazi, who has all the privilege and all the money and all the resources and can literally get away with murder, to lower and lower levels. People in Gaza are lowest than people in the Bank. People in the West Bank are lower than people in Jerusalem. People in Jerusalem are lower than Palestinians from the Galilee and the Negev. People in the Negev and the Galilee, as Muslims and Christians, are lower than, let's say, Ethiopian Jews.
Do they have multiple types of cards to identify these people?
Yes. For
So
the Palestinians,
what is the card
yes.
color of if you are Jewish?
For the Palestinians, yes, we have different ID cards, or we have no ID cards, as the refugees, millions of refugees in Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan don't have any ID cards, are not even allowed to come visit their families or their villages from which they were ethnically cleansed. So this is the apartheid system. When you have a different set of laws that apply to different people living in the same country, that is apartheid. And there's an international convention against the crime of apartheid. So what's happening in Jerusalem is a symptom of the underlying problem, which is settler colonialism. That's a proper terminology for it, settler colonialism and apartheid.
Professor, could you please tell me, we'll talk about apartheid because B'Tselem and the Human Rights Watch both have declared that to be river to sea is an apartheid regime. And you're saying what is happening around Aqsa, taking people out who are already refugees, were settled in agreement around Aqsa. Now they're being kicked out. Tell us, what's the color of the ID would the Jewish people have?
The Jewish residents of Israel They have a blue ID card, and they also have the ability to get citizenship. People from Jerusalem who are Palestinian, very difficult for them to get Israeli citizenship. Whereas any American Jew or European Jew who's never set foot in this country can come at the airport, get automatic citizenship because they are Jewish. So they carry a different category of recognition in terms of citizenship. Israel is the only country in the world that designates what's called nationality different from citizenship. They consider all Jews of the world as nationals of the state of Israel, part of what's called Am Israel, the people of Israel. Whereas people who are living here, even the lucky few who have Israeli citizenship, who happen to be non-Jewish, they are discriminated against. There's more than 65 laws within the state of Israel that discriminate against Israeli citizens, even who carry passports, who are either Jewish or non-Jewish. If they're non-Jewish, there are 65 laws that discriminate against them.
So, Professor, how far are you living right now from East Jerusalem?
From East Jerusalem, it's about 4.5 kilometers. That's about 3 miles.
But
So
you are
I
not allowed to
walk it. If I was allowed to walk it, I would walk it. But I'm not allowed to enter Jerusalem, as I said. Even, by the way, with my American passport, I am not allowed to enter Jerusalem because my family is not Jewish. My family happens to be Christian.
So you live just 4 miles away, but you cannot enter Jerusalem despite the fact you are Christian and you have an American passport. How do they know that you are not Jewish? American passport does not write religion there.
No, but my American passport is not usable because Israel checks for Israeli visas on it. And since I do not have Israeli visa, I did not enter the country with my American passport. We cannot enter the country with our American passport because we are residents here. We are Palestinian. I was born here. An American Jew or American from other religions could try to come. But even then, I know many people who don't have residency, friends of mine, who come from Jerusalem, for example, or Jaffa. Their families were refugees, and now they have American passports. They try to come on the airport. They see their name is Arabic, like my name, Mazen Kumsiya, is Arabic. So they deny them entry. So that's how they decide. They have ways of course, everything is computerized now, and they know who's who is Jewish, who's not Jewish, all of this stuff.
So Jewish people.
But I want to add one more thing, by the way. They denied some Jews the right to enter the country simply because they oppose Zionism.
So this is what I want to talk a little bit. Jewish people in the occupied Palestine and Israel, some of them do not like what is happening. For example, Beit Salem is an Israeli human rights organization. I'm assuming they are Jewish also. They are calling these policies to be apartheid as well. So is the movement among the Jewish people for equal rights for Palestinians, is that movement increasing or decreasing in strength?
I would say as a percentage of the population, it's not changing. It's a small percentage, just like whites in South Africa who opposed apartheid. It was a small percentage. Important, of course, important because in the case of South Africa was to show that this is not a struggle between whites and blacks. It was a struggle between those who support apartheid and those who oppose apartheid. And clearly, some of the privileged white Afrikaner community decided they oppose apartheid, even though financially to them it's beneficial, they opposed it. It was a minority. It was an important minority, and we respected that minority. And some of them even were killed or tortured by the apartheid regime, as many Israeli Jews who oppose Zionism. They remain a very tiny minority. I don't want to exaggerate the aspect of their importance. And it's understandable that they are a minority. It's an important minority. But we're not going to rely on those minority to liberate us. We have to liberate ourselves with the help of the whole world, not just us.
Recently, the Human Rights Watch came out within last few weeks, accusing Israel of the crimes against humanity of apartheid. But in the same document, they have said that the Palestinian Authority somehow supports Israelis in maintaining that apartheid regime. In what ways do you think that happens?
Well, I mean, it was the Palestinian Authority was created precisely to protect the security of Israel. The Oslo Accords, their main intention was to create security for the state of Israel and create a subservient community of Palestinians that serve Israeli interests. This is why it was created. That's why we have the Oslo Accords. It's the same way in South Africa there was Chief Buthelezi, a black South African king of the Zulus, so to speak, whose job was to ensure security of the white regime in South Africa. This is understandable and natural. And there was also the Vichy government in France under the Nazi occupation. This is natural. I mean, every situation is relatively unique, and I don't want to make it identical to those other situations, but certainly the security, so-called security coordination between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli occupiers facilitates the occupation and encourages the occupation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed to continue to exist. And when Yasser Arafat, for example, tried to raise his head and resist a little bit, they killed him basically, and they put Mahmoud Abbas in his place. This is the reality that we face. I'm sorry to be blunt about it, but I'm not relying on Palestinian Authority or anybody else. The people are the ones who determine the future in this country, like in any country, like in South Africa, like in everywhere else. The people are the ones who mobilize, and the people have been showing heroic resistance. I wrote a book called Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment, which reviews the resistance over 130 years of encounter with Zionism here. And it is a history of hope and empowerment. It's a history of success and not failure. And we are succeeding even now with all the killing that Israel does, with all the attempts to ethnic cleansing. Israel would have made Jerusalem a Jewish city a long, long time ago if it were not for the heroic resistance of people in and around Jerusalem.
Well, Professor Mazen Qumsiya, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid, and we hope you stay safe, Professor Qumsiya. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Keep watching Muslim Network TV. For more, visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.
Special thanks to our official supporter, Zagat Foundation of America.